All right, today I'm going to be talking about some background information on the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer. I want to give you just a timeline really quick so we're kind of like all on the same page. So, 400s to 500s, that's when Beowulf takes place. We read that earlier in our medieval unit. 450 to 900, that's your Anglo-Saxon society ruling in England. 600 to the thousands, the monks are spreading Christianity in England. In the thousands, Christians in England are recording their Anglo-Saxon stories. 1066, William the Conqueror, the French king, invades England. That's when your upper classes began speaking French and your lower classes were speaking middle or Old English still. 1095. At that time, your Old English was kind of transforming into Middle English, which we learned about in the history of the English language. 1095, the Catholic Church called for the First Holy War, known as the First Crusade. In 1337, the Hundred Years' War begins. 1347, the Black Death reaches Europe, beginning in Italy and spreading throughout the continent. Both of those two events had a significant impact on Europe, and specifically in England, where we had a lot of societal and political changes that were happening there. And then 1387, Chaucer begins writing the Canterbury Tales. So a little bit of background on the Canterbury Tales. Chaucer is living during an age of transition and change in England. Post those two major events, the Hundred Years' War and the Black Death, things are changing rapidly. The landscape has changed rapidly. The plague wiped out about 50% of London's population the first time through. And so there was a lot of rebuilding and transition that was happening there. Literacy begins to spread. Works were written in English for the first time. And those two events that we've talked about, the plague and the Hundred Years' War, they upended the old social norms and led to new English rulers and a new way of life. And so things were changing rapidly. The Canterbury Tales is very unique. It marked the beginning of an age of literature about every different class of people, not just those upper class kings and warriors that we've seen in some of the earlier texts in this unit. This story features members of three major social classes. The first was the merchant class. That's your lower class, where your peasants, workers, traders, etc. Then you have the middle class, which is the ecclesiastical class, members of the church, nuns, monks, that kind of thing. And then at the very top, the hierarchy, you have that nobility class, the knights, squires, dukes, lords, all of those at the top of the hierarchy there. The stories were written in Middle English, which bears a close resemblance to the English that we speak today. The book was so important that the King of England started speaking English more than French. So they had been speaking, the upper classes had been speaking French since the Norman invasion. And so the upper class followed suit as soon as the king began speaking English more. They began speaking they reverted back to their old ways, and English became the dominant language again. The story is about a religious pilgrimage to the Canterbury Cathedral, which was a popular pilgrimage spot in England due to a murder that took place there. A friend of Henry Henry II, I'm sorry, too many Henrys. Thomas Becket, he was an archbishop at Canterbury Cathedral, and he was killed by political enemies. He was assassinated, and the church named him a saint after his death. And so people would travel to the Canterbury Cathedral to pay respect to Thomas Becket and honor the dead. Pilgrimages, though, in general, were very important in medieval culture. And all social classes were expected to complete religious pilgrimages, to fight, to honor, to pay tribute to God, to pay respect to the dead. We still see pilgrimages in different cultures. The Muslim culture, where they make the pilgrimage each year to Mecca to honor and pray, and that's just a religious pilgrimage that they're kind of not made to do, but they feel led to do within their religion. So we kind of see that still in other cultures as well. This story, this book is literally the story of the world's weirdest road trip. So it begins at the Tabard Inn, where the narrator meets up with all these classes of people that he will be traveling with on the road to the Canterbury Cathedral to receive blessings from the martyr Saint Becket. The host of the inn, Harry Bailey, suggests that to make the trip pass faster rather than singing those annoying car songs, that each member of the party tells on the journey, and the person who tells the best story will be rewarded at the end with a sumptuous dinner paid for by the other members of the party. And Bailey decides to accompany the group and serve as a judge of the tales. So Chaucer had originally planned to include over 100 stories in the Canterbury Tales, and in the end, only 24 stories were included with the prologue at the very beginning, which is what I want to talk about next. So that's just the beginning of the pilgrimage. Talks about all the different classes coming together and that whole idea of the road trip game that they were going to play with the stories and that kind of thing. It's told from Chaucer's point of view, which is the earliest example of a first person narrative. That's what makes this unique. That, and it was the first tale about people of all different social classes. And the prologue offers social commentary. So we have opinions and moral judgments of the different classes and people. And Chaucer uses both direct and indirect characterization to introduce the different pilgrims. Both direct, which is when we get direct information from the author about the character, and then indirect, where we get descriptions and details about the character that reveal something about his or her personality and motivations. Okay, and that is pretty much it. We are only reading the Wife of Bath's tale for this particular unit, and I did a separate screencast on the Wife of Bath's tale, and you can check that out next.